think living in community is a really important part of practice and a really deep and powerful place of practice, and it's what I'm really enthusiastic about. So trying to share something that's really strong for me, it's quite powerful. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience of living in community and how that's helped deepen my awareness. I've lived in a couple of communities, a couple of tree runner communities. One was the Buddhafield community, which was based down in Devon, which now has ended, and currently I'm living up at Dharma Retreat Centre in Scotland. So there's so much to say about how community can help deepen your awareness, and I was really stuck as to kind of how to frame it, and it wasn't until I was kind of lying in bed just a few weeks ago that came to me that I think the clearest way to talk about it is to frame it within the practices that True Ratna teach, which is the mindfulness and the metta bhavana, and how living in community can really help you take those two practices off the cushion and into the rest of your life. So I'll start with mindfulness, and then I'll move on to metta. So firstly, I think there's kind of three main ways in which practicing mindfulness off the cushion can help you gain deeper awareness, kind of while living in community. So they're all kind of combined and melted together as well, so I can't just take them kind of step by step, so I'll kind of talk about them all at the same time in a way. So they are gaining awareness of yourself, like your reactions and the way that you think, the views you have, awareness of others, like their reactions and their views, and then kind of the interplay of how those two combine to create consequences. So you can't seeing these three things it's kind of inescapable if you live in community and want to live harmoniously. And I think overall that's one of the most powerful things about living in community. It's really present all the time. You can't escape yourself, you can't escape others, and you really have to look at yourself and others and how that all interplays, and bring the whole of yourself and kind of let others see you and see others, because there's nothing else that you can do in that situation. Anything else would be kind of not being authentic and moving away from your intention. Living in community, there's many times that I've really wanted to detach and kind of stay in my room and not really deal with any of the issues, but I just can't, because I'll have to leave my room to go and do whatever, and I will see somebody in the community and I'll have to engage with them. I'll have to engage with myself, and I'll just have to carry on. It's inescapable, and it's terrifying, but it's also totally exhilarating. I kind of constantly feel like I'm living at that front edge of my practice, where I'm constantly being challenged to face myself and face others and grow. Of course it's not always difficult and edgy and horrible. A lot of the time you can really access a really easy flow where you're really bringing your best self, and it's really that's just really truly beautiful to feel that in yourself and to see that in others. It's really moving. So the first part of practicing mindfulness off the cushion, awareness of yourself. So in the book that my study group is studying, we're currently studying What is the Sangha by Sangharakshita, and he says, and there's a quote in there which says, "We get to know ourselves best in relation to other people." So those two stages, the kind of getting awareness of yourself and awareness of others, are just totally inextricably linked. One feeds into the other feeds into, they just feed into each other really clearly. So to get to know yourself, you need other people to reflect yourself back, and you need to be able to reflect to others. In community, you're surrounded by people who are like mirrors. You can't escape. I can sometimes feel like I'm in one of those halls of mirrors. Everywhere I turn, it's like a different kind of weird reflection. Some of them are nice. It can be really interesting kind of seeing all these different aspects of yourself that you wouldn't notice if you were on your own, or you would kind of rationalise away, like, oh, it's okay that I'm like that because of this and this. You really have to face yourself. So a good example of this is related to the title, is cleanliness. Like, I probably have the highest tolerance of anybody I know to dirt and mess. I haven't met anybody else who can be as messy as me and just be quite happy about it. So I kind of knew this before I started living in community. I was always quite messy at home. Had a lot of arguments with my parents growing up because of how messy I was. When I lived on my own or in shared houses, I'd use every single plate in the house. And, so there's piles of mouldy plates everywhere. And then I'd wash everything. And then I'd do it all over again. I'd never learn from my mistakes. It's kind of, I was thinking about it and I realised that dirt's kind of invisible to me. Like, my eyes kind of skim over it and I don't really see it. Just kind of get on with things. So, I never really thought about it. I just ignored that kind of aspect of myself, or that habit, or that trend. And I just rationalised it away. Like, I didn't want to look in the mirror. I didn't want to see the clear reflection. I just rationalised it like everybody else has a problem. It's not my problem. If they've got a problem with mess, it's nothing to do with me. They can clear it up if they want it to be clean. Oh dear, it's quite embarrassing. I wrote down some of the views that would go down round and round in my head, and it'd be like, I would think that people were controlling if they wanted things to be clean and stuff like that. I know. I just ignored all of the effects that was having on myself, my relationships with people, and on the people around me. It must have caused so much distress to my mum. Like, I feel so guilty about it now. Even kind of working for Buddhafield, my stuff would be like strewn around fields. I'd be working here and there'd be stuff over all 3 fields. I'd kind of be wandering around. Have you seen this? Does anybody know where this is? So when I first moved into Dharma, which was about 7 or 8 months ago, I was still kind of in that mode, like quite messy and not really looking at the effects. And one of the people that I live with kind of was quite tidy, and she came into my room one day about a month after I moved in, and we were quite good friends, so she could, I didn't get too offended when she said this. She kind of she came in, she stood in the door, she looked around, she was like, so does this chaos reflect your mind? And I'm really impressed that you managed to be as organised and do as much work as you do, living in this. And I was a bit like, oh, okay, come on, you could have softened that a bit, but I was like, okay. And and somehow, for some reason, it really, not like nothing else before, it really just got in there and poked in there, and like an arrow or something, and I kind of thought about it. And I decided to kind of try and have awareness and mindfulness of the effect that it was having on me. So every time I went into my room and I had to step over 5 piles of things to get to my bed, and then I had to move a load of stuff off my bed to get into bed, I kind of think, well, how is this making me feel? How do I feel? What is my reaction to this? And actually it wasn't very nice. I wasn't very happy living like that. I would get quite frustrated with myself. I'd spend a lot of time looking for things and not finding them. So I began to see a little bit clearer from that mirroring, and so I cleared my room. I tidied my room. I spent 2 days tidying, taking all of the millions of mugs and plates and stuff out one by one, slowly, so the rest of the community didn't see how many I'd been hiding away. And I cleared my desk. I made my bed, and then tried to be aware of the effect that had on me. And it was amazing. I did so much more stuff. I got so much more stuff done. I felt much clearer in my mind. I was much happier. And so I just think that's a really good example of how mindfulness of just how you're feeling and your outside conditions can really affect things, and how living in community can really help you see clearly. Had my mum come into my room and visited and said, "Oh, this is a bit messy," we would have had a screaming match probably. But because it was somebody who I was living in community with, who I had set that intention to kind of deepen my practice with and communicate clearly with, I was able to kind of take it with a pinch of salt and not react so personally to it. So, yeah, it's a slow process. My bed still does get used as storage sometimes, but it's kind of like the process. Living in community helps you deepen those processes of change, and it helps you speed them up in a way. I think on my own I wouldn't have got to this point of kind of seeing that tidying my room is a good thing, which is a small thing, but it has a really massive knock-on effect. So that whole episode's not just confined to my room, I was pretty chaotic in the rest of the community. So this kind of moves into awareness, having awareness of others and your effect on them. I'd always leave the kitchen messy. I'd never do the washing up. Again, thinking, if it bothers somebody else, then that's their problem. If they want a clean kitchen, they can clean it. I'm not cleaning it. And yet, like with my room, it was a reflection back that helped me change. I was sitting in a morning check-in with the community where we all kind of go around and say a bit about how we are, and somebody else in the community checked in about just really deeply about how living with a dirty kitchen made them feel, how it stressed them out, how it frustrated them, how they had to spend time which they really needed to spend doing other things, cleaning it to give themselves some mental space. And I just remember sitting there really deeply connecting with, oh God, that's a consequence of actions that I have done. That's a really clear vision of conditionality. I left that mess there. This person is distressed and in a negative state of mind. And it was really powerful. And so in the same way that I thought about my room, I started to think about the effect, really started to think about the effect that my actions had on other people. Not just on the other community members, but we have a lot of visitors coming into the community. So, I thought about, well, what is it like for a visitor to come in and see a messy, dirty kitchen? And yeah, it really helped me change. I decided to kind of see what the effect would be if I did start kind of pulling my weight a bit and doing a little bit of cleaning and doing my own washing up and stuff. And yeah, it was really, really powerful because I talked to the community about my process about it. And so to have them appreciate that and kind of see my process, and to be able to hear them saying, oh, it's so nice to have a clean kitchen, it's so nice to have a clean house that I personally haven't had to do. Yeah, it was really transformational. And yeah, it's been a really good mindful practice just in doing things for me, because at first it was quite a chore. I resisted every crumb. I was like, oh, I don't want to do this. Oh, I don't want to do this. But trying to find the joy of doing the washing up just to be there doing the washing up without thinking about the consequences, or if I do or do not do it. If I just do it, then yeah, has been a really good mindful practice in itself. And if I can find pleasure in the just doing of it, then that pleasure can kind of go on to the results as well. So yeah, it's just another example of how awareness of self and awareness of others can lead to deeper mindfulness and awareness. So those two kind of examples, they're not just about mindfulness kind of on the surface of doing things, of how many crumbs I swept up, how many mugs I washed or whatever. It's got a lot of depth because it's not a special story. It's not unique. Everybody has problems with that when you're living with somebody. Like cleanliness is one of those ever perennial issues because everybody has different opinions and different levels, I guess. So it's a real kind of catalytic space for people to come up against each other, for them to learn how to communicate and to be able to bring themselves and take into account others. So yeah, like in my case, as a result of noticing habits of messiness, I had to go underneath that and go, well, I had to really question things and go, well, what's underneath that? What are the views that I have? Some of which I've shared, which I'm quite embarrassed about. But yeah, like, what are the views that I have that support this habit? And I just really had to look at it and see how it pointed to a way of thinking and reacting. And once I'd seen that, I couldn't just carry on with it and like go, oh yeah, I've seen that, and then carry on doing it. I really had to change. I really had to challenge myself and change. So so that I could contribute to the kind of the harmony of the community I was living in. So Sangha actually was right when he said we got to get to know ourselves. We get to know ourselves best in relationship to other people. It was only when I started to really connect and engage with other people's reflections of myself that I could really deeply start to change. I've kind of already been talking about it a little bit, but I want to talk a bit about the interplay between the mindfulness of self and other, because actually, like it has already probably become a little bit clear, they're not separate. They're not two things. I'm not over here and other people aren't over here. We're in the middle. We're kind of in this like melting pot cauldron of community where we all come up against each other all of the time. It's an immediate context in which to practice, and you don't have to go to the Buddhist centre or go anywhere else to kind of engage with awareness and mindfulness. It's right there in your house, in your bedroom, in your kitchen, and I think that's just really, really powerful. So that's like a little bit about mindfulness, and so I often find myself definitely at times when I was going through that kind of experience of looking at my habits to do with cleaning and stuff, I kind of saw a lot of things, or I saw a lot of views, and I started noticing things, and a lot of the time I questioned myself. I kind of came up with the question, well, what do I do with that? What do I do with that? Oh, I see I have this view. Oh, I see I have this habit. What's the next step? How do I react to that? Because I knew I could react with blame and hatred and go, oh God, I'm rubbish. I'm totally rubbish that I'm messy and other people are unhappy because I'm messy. But that wouldn't really have achieved anything. That wouldn't have kind of helped fuel change, because I would have just got stuck on a wheel of going round and round, hating myself, carrying on doing it, hating myself for doing it. I think it just wouldn't have got me anywhere. And this is where metta comes in, because if you can react to yourself with love and acceptance, then you can find a gap in which you can choose not to do that thing again, and you can kind of get onto what the Buddhists call the spiral path, where you can go, instead of going round and round, repeating your mistakes and habits, you can go upwards towards kind of being more integrated and towards enlightenment. Like with mindfulness, there's a similar thing with metta bhavana. There's kind of metta in relation to yourself, metta in relation to others, and then the kind of interplay between them. And they also, I think, correspond to the 5 stages of the metta bhavana. So you have the first stage of the metta bhavana is having metta for yourself. And that's just like the bedrock of everything, really. You can't change, I don't think, without metta. It's a real fuel. So yeah, going back to like the cleaning thing, I couldn't have changed if I didn't have that fuel of accepting, yes, I'm messy, yes, I've made other people unhappy because of my actions. By having metta for that, for myself, I can kind of loosen that grip of kind of, oh God, you're a bad person. It kind of loosens, and I can let that fall away, and I can find a space in which I can decide to do something different. Yeah. So I have a constant kind of practice of this actually, so every week for an hour in the community on a Tuesday morning, 10:30 till 11:30, we clean the community for an hour. And when I first moved in, it was an hour of torture. I'd be mopping the floor. I don't want to mop the floor. I don't want to mop the floor. I don't want to do this hoovering. Why am I doing this? I don't care. Other people have this problem. Yeah, it was just a lot of resistance, and it was a really unpleasant hour. I would go round and round and round and round, and I'd come out of it in an awful, awful mood, and then I'd be awful to work with for the rest of the day. I still have that resistance sometimes, but if I can react to it with metta, or if I can even just start it with metta, then it's just, there's a gap in which I can decide, I'm just going to clean this because I'm going to clean it, or I'm just going to clean this cooker because I know that the next person to cook in it would really like it to be clean, and really find, like, yeah, fuel it with metta and there's space. If I can find like a little bit of metta for myself in my resistance, often by kind of laughing at how ridiculous it is that I'm hating mopping a floor so much, then yeah, a little gap opens up and you can kind of elbow your way in and find that gap and jump onto the spiral and go upwards. So yeah, that's kind of the first stage, and I've already kind of started talking about the second stage, metta for others, which kind of puts all three, the second, third and fourth stage of the metta bhavana into that stage. So metta for a really good friend, metta for a neutral person, and metta for somebody you're having difficulties with. So these three things are things that you're constantly challenged with in community, because you're living with people who you might not have had a choice with. So both the communities I lived in, I didn't have a choice about who I lived with. It wasn't like I got together with some people and said, I quite like you, we get on well, we've got the same little interests, let's live together. It wasn't like that. I just, arrived at these two different places and were like, oh, right, you're living here, oh, and you, and I'm living here too, and I know nothing about any of you, and you're all different ages and from all different places, and yeah, so there's, in both of the communities, there hasn't been that base connection. I've had to really start from the bottom and find connections with people that I might not have had anything in common with in the first place. So with each of these, kind of mindfulness comes into play with metta in different ways to help you kind of deepen awareness. So with a good friend, having mindfulness and metta in your friendship is really helpful, because now that you're good friends, you're kind of quite accepting of each other. There's a lot of metta been built up, and so you can really start to poke each other and go a bit deeper and look at kind of habitual things that you bring to friendship and that you bring to interacting with somebody who's a good friend. So yeah, recently I've had this with one of my really close friends who I've lived and worked with on and off for about 5 years. We joined Buddhafield at the same time and then lived in community for, I think, 2.5 years. And then since then we've lived in various kind of field-based communities working for Buddhafield. And so yeah, after about 5 or 6 years of friendship, we were able to kind of, something was a bit off. We weren't really connecting, we weren't really talking that much. And because of how much metta we kind of had built up for ourselves and for each other, we were able to kind of sit down and have a conversation and bring some attention to that kind of dissonance that had come up between us. And we were able to both mirror and reflect back kind of habitual patterns that we'd both been enacting within the friendship. So to react to challenges towards like my deep-seated patterns within friendship with metta, for both myself in accepting that that's what I was doing, and with metta for the other person in kind of not attacking them for maybe criticising me. It takes a real depth of metta. And awareness. So the next stage is the neutral person. So I found that living with somebody who's, pretty neutral, I don't really have that much to do with them, I don't really have that much interest in them, we haven't got a point of connection. I find that if I can find just one tiny little point of connection, one thing that I can appreciate in them, then that gives me the gap to elbow my way in and kind of get onto that kind of spiral path of metta and awareness. So I've got an example of this as well. When I was living at Trevance, I was living with a guy who, I just didn't really have anything in common with. He was older than me, from a different place in the UK. He was interested in, we'd sit next to each other and I'd just be like, I just don't really have anything to say to you. And so we went on like that for a while, just there. And then one day I started to notice that every day after dinner, while everybody else was sitting about having a cup of tea and chatting, he would quietly get up, pick up a few plates, go into the kitchen and do all of the washing up from the preparation of dinner and all the plates, and then go off and not come back, and go off and do his own thing. And he wouldn't say anything about it. He wouldn't ask for thanks. And nobody really noticed. And he just did it every single day for kind of months. And I was like, oh, right, okay. What's going on there? I found it really inspiring, because I felt like he was really enacting a deep-seated metta for all of these people, some of whom, like me, he had nothing in common with, very rarely had conversation with. And I just found that really interesting. It kind of made me go, oh, what's going on? Like, what's going on in his head? It really interested me, and I found myself wanting to get to know him. I found myself kind of seeking him out a little bit and kind of sitting down and being like, so, what's going on? Where are you from? What's your life been like? And really starting to get to know him a bit deeper. And he was quite quiet and shy. So I kind of treated it like some kind of detective novel, kind of like having to draw him out a little bit, like, come on, tell me something about yourself. And and once I got to know him, he was so funny, and he had so much depth and such a deep love of the Dharma, and I really connected with him and really found a deep source of kind of love and metta for somebody who, on the surface, at the start, I just had nothing in common with. So even though we don't live together anymore, and I haven't seen him probably for a couple of years, we are still in contact, and the connection's not we're interested in the same things or we're living in the same place or anything. The connection is just metta, having that quality of metta for each other, and connection to the Dharma. So now, practicing metta for people in the 4 stage is always a bit twitchy, I think. Inevitably, in community, there will always be at least a few people who are in your 4th stage at any one point. Because like I said, living in the community, you really come up against other people, you really come up against yourself and how you want things to be and how they want things to be, and that just crashes up against each other quite a lot of the time. And I guess I work with it in the same way that I do with somebody who's neutral, is I try to find like points of connection, or more deeply, I try to find points of appreciation, not just ways of connecting, but things I can appreciate about that person. Even though I'm finding them difficult, what are they doing which makes me happy, or what are they doing which I can find inspiration in, or how can I see good in them, basically. And also that it can be a real tool for awareness and metta for yourself, because it can bring you back to questioning your views and habits and assumptions, like what is going on here, why what's going on for me? What is my reaction? Why am I reacting this way to this particular person at this particular time when they do this thing? Yeah, it's like a circle, you know. Having a reaction to somebody, like a negative reaction to somebody, you have to look into your own you have to look at your own reactions and try to understand what's going on and have metta for that and have acceptance for that. So it all goes around in a circle and feeds each other. Because if I can have awareness of my reactions, then I can let go of them a little bit and see that they can change and fade away, and that my opinion of this person or my experience of this person as somebody who's difficult can also change, and that they are not difficult. That is not a definition of them as a person being that I find them difficult. That is just me and my reactions and my habits and views, and so it can, it just loosens that like negativity and that view. Something that's fueled that and been helpful is kind of remembering that everybody's doing the best that they can with the knowledge that they have, and that that's just metaphor in itself, kind of trusting that everybody's trying their best and that you're trying your best as well. And so even if there is difficulties, that's not the be all and end all. You're just trying, and it's probably unintentional. So metta in all three of those stages is about realising non-separateness, and using that idea to see that all of the people that end up in all of those three stages, because anybody can be in any of them. You know, I've had really good friends be in the difficult person stage. They're all the same as me. They're not separate from me. They all have the same fears and hopes. They all have the same kinds of griefs and angers, the same types of happiness and inspirations. And remembering that can just loosen the habitual kind of tendencies to look at people with certain views or to see them as difficult. So, and it doesn't have to be like this big overflowing outpouring of metta and love for the people that you're living with. It can just start really small. So I just kind of finally want to share something that we've started to do in the community I'm living in, which has really helped all three of those stages of metta, the difficult person, the neutral, and the good friend. Is that just finding really small ways to appreciate each other. So without really talking about it, we've all started to, there's a lot of coming and going, people going on retreat, people going to see families and stuff like that. So there's usually somebody away. And we've kind of evolved this thing that if you've gone away, on the day that you come back, somebody will go into your room, make your bed with clean sheets, put some flowers in there, and maybe put a little card or a bit of chocolate or something to like kind of welcome you home. And you don't really talk about it. You don't say, I've done this for you. It's just there. It's just been done. You go into your room. You don't know who's done it. And it's just really beautiful to see somebody else having that awareness of you, and that you might have had a long journey. You might just need to go straight to bed. You might need something beautiful to come home to because you've had a hard time. It's really amazing to receive that kind of metta and awareness of you. And also it's amazing to do that for somebody else, to try and have that awareness of, well, what might their experience have been like? What might they need to come home to? You know, choosing sheets that you think they might like, or going to the garden and picking the flowers that you know that they're like in the colour scheme that will match their bedroom. It's a really like powerful practice of metta and awareness. So lastly, the kind of interaction of metta and the interaction of self and other within metta, kind of equating to the fifth stage of the metta bhavana. I mean, I don't think there's much to say in this bit, because the point of the fifth stage of the metta bhavana is to kind of bring all of those people together from the other first four stages, so yourself, good friend, neutral person, and someone you're having difficulties with, and kind of practice indiscriminate metta for them, and then take it out to the wider world. I think that's just the interplay of self and other, like the bringing together of them and seeing that they're not separate, that you can, no matter what your attitude to anybody is, whether it's positive or negative or neutral, you can have equal amounts of metta for them. I just want to end with a couple of examples of how I've experienced that at Buddhafield and at Dharma. So, working for Buddhafield, say you're setting this festival up. You spent 3 weeks working in a field with quite a small group of people. You've connected. It's been beautiful, been lovely, and then all of these people come in. 3,000 people kind of arrive, and some of them are stressed, some of them aren't. Some of them have never been camping before, and it's quite difficult. Some of them have, wet tents, and some people can be quite difficult. It can be really hard. But practicing metta through living in community and practicing having that indiscriminate metta for everybody you're living with can really fuel being able to react to anybody with acceptance and love. So when someone comes storming up to you and says, my tent's wet and I need some food and there's no food in the crew you can you're not going to react to them, you're not going to shout back at them and kind of feel attacked and defensive. You're going to be able to kind of give acceptance and love and kind of try and help them sort their problems out. And similar with Dharma, so that every Friday a new retreat starts. So every Friday night after a full week of work, I'm sitting on reception kind of greeting people. And some people have never been on retreat before. Some people are coming from very stressful jobs. Some people just have, had long drives, are grumpy because they haven't eaten enough. And so, again, living in community and practicing that indiscriminate metta can really help me respond to anybody who comes through that door with whatever problems they have, with acceptance and metta. So, that's just about it. Living, kind of in conclusion, living in community is like just a really deep, powerful and all-encompassing practice, and I hope that some of the things I've talked about today can help you in however you're living, because I think the things that I've talked about are not just applicable to living in community, they're just applicable to people and to your kind of connections and interactions with people. You don't have to be living with somebody who you don't really like, or you don't have to be living with somebody who you're quite neutral towards to practice metta towards them. It's totally applicable over all experiences and all contexts. Thanks.